The alien crowd gathered in the Grand Colosseum of Vodrak Prime, a sprawling fortress world at the heart of the Galactic Empire. Under the towering obsidian sky, thousands of reptilian Zalari nobles sat in their golden viewing boxes, their elongated faces twisted in amusement as they watched the execution platform below. The prisoners, 5 battered humans, their uniforms torn, their faces bloodied, knelt on the cold steel. A towering Zalari executioner, clad in ceremonial battle armor, stood over them with a plasma halberd. Supreme Commander Drokith observed from his elevated throne, his scaled fingers curled in satisfaction. A veteran of 1,000 planetary conquests, he had crushed entire civilizations beneath his fleet. Humanity had been no different. Their resistance had been brief, their weapons primitive. What chance did a single planet have against an empire that had subjugated galaxies? He leaned forward, addressing the gathered elites. Behold the fate of those who defy the will of the empire. These creatures believed they could resist. Let this be a lesson to all who dream of defiance. The executioner raised his halberd. The human prisoners did not beg. They did not plead. One of them, a woman with a broken nose and a defiant glare, spat at the feet of her captors. The crowd erupted in laughter. Then, in the moment before the blade fell, a sharp electronic chime echoed through the Colosseum speakers. A distress signal. For the briefest second, Drokitha's expression flickered with something close to curiosity. Then he waved a dismissive hand. The executions continued. The halberd fell, and 5 human heads rolled onto the blood-slicked platform. Far beyond the fortress world, deep within the shadows of a derelict moon, a man sat in silence. The distress signal flickered across the cracked screen of a stolen Zalari datapad. He barely blinked as he replayed the last transmission of the fallen operatives. Captain Daniel Reeves, former SAS Operative, was the last human on Vodrak Prime. He had been there for weeks, deep in the underbelly of the Empire's capital, moving like a ghost. He had no fleet, no reinforcements, just a mission. His orders had been simple: gather intelligence, sabotage enemy infrastructure, and disappear. But now the mission had changed. The Empire thought they had crushed humanity, but they had made a mistake. They had left one of them alive. Reeves exhaled, slow and steady, setting the datapad down beside the scattered remains of his last meal. The dim glow of the emergency lights outlined his sharp, weathered features. His tactical gear, scavenged from fallen enemies, was a mismatched amalgamation of alien armor plates and human ingenuity. A knife rested beside his hand, its blade polished to a deadly sheen. He reached for his weapon, a heavily modified Zalari plasma rifle. Standard issue for Imperial forces, but in his hands, it had been turned into something far more lethal. He ran a final diagnostic, ensuring every component was functional. There was no room for error. Not tonight. Vodrak Prime was considered an impenetrable fortress, its defenses layered with orbital gun platforms and automated drone sentries. Its cities were walled fortresses teeming with elite alien warriors bred for war. Yet Reeves had slipped through its cracks, moving through the underworld, learning its weaknesses. He stood and stretched, rolling his shoulders, then pulled a battered, blackened SAS patch from his pocket. His fingers traced the familiar insignia. Who dares wins. The last reminder of a world the Empire had tried to erase. A world he intended to avenge. Tonight he was done hiding. The command tower loomed over the city like a monolithic dagger, its jagged spires cutting into the night sky. It housed the central security systems, planetary defense controls, and, most importantly, the Supreme Commander himself. Reeves moved through the darkness, slipping past patrolling sentries with calculated precision. He was not a soldier in an army. He was a predator in enemy territory. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. He had memorized the shift rotations, the weak points in surveillance coverage. He knew which corridors would be lightly patrolled, where the guards grew complacent. He entered through a maintenance shaft, bypassing the biometric scanners with a stolen officer's keycard. Inside, the hallways were cold and sterile, lined with towering hollow displays broadcasting imperial propaganda. He ignored them, pressing forward, staying to the shadows. A guard rounded the corner. Reeves moved like a whisper, his knife flashing in the dim light. One quick strike, silent, efficient. The alien collapsed without a sound, its throat slit. Reeves pulled the body into a side alcove and kept moving. Step by step, the fortress unraveled before him. He reached a control panel and began his work. With a few keystrokes, he shut down sections of internal security, rerouting surveillance feeds. Cameras flickered, then cut to static. Automated turrets powered down, their targeting systems scrambled. Within minutes, an entire sector of the tower had been blinded. Then he planted the explosives. Charges were placed with expert precision along structural weak points. He moved swiftly, setting traps and diversions. A false data trail fed conflicting information into the enemy's communication network. Ghost signals of supposed intruders in multiple locations, sowing confusion before the first explosion even detonated. And then he waited. The first blast tore through the lower levels, shattering durasteel supports. Alarms blared. A second explosion followed, rupturing power conduits, sending cascades of sparks raining through the corridors. Panic spread like wildfire as security teams scrambled to respond. Reeves moved with them, slipping through the chaos, cutting down targets with ruthless efficiency. Plasma bolts hissed past him, slamming into walls as he returned fire with precise, controlled bursts. The hallways became a killing ground. He advanced, relentless, methodical. Another guard fell, then another. The command tower trembled as the explosions continued to rip through its foundation. In the Grand Colosseum, Droketh watched the unfolding chaos with mounting fury. He rose to his feet, eyes narrowing as reports flooded in. A single human had infiltrated his fortress. One man. Impossible. His advisors urged retreat. Droketh ignored them. Reeves was coming for him, and nothing in the universe would stop him now. The command tower burned. Smoke curled from its shattered foundations, filling the sky with plumes of blackened ruin. Alarms blared across Vodrak Prime as emergency sirens screamed through the streets. Elite Zalari shock troopers, their armor glinting under the flickering emergency lights, stormed into the wreckage, weapons raised, scanning for the unseen enemy. Reeves was already moving. He ducked through the ruined corridors, plasma rifle tight in his grip. The chaos was his ally. The Empire was built on order, precision, control. It did not know how to handle unpredictability, and Reeves was the embodiment of it. Every second counted. He had to reach the upper levels before they re-established security. A pair of Zalari enforcers rounded the corner, their rifles sweeping. Reeves dropped low, rolling into the shadows. His knife flashed once, twice. The bodies hit the ground with a dull thud. He took a rifle from one of them, slinging it over his back. More firepower would be useful. Ahead, the grand lift to the Supreme Commander's chamber loomed. A massive construct of reinforced alloy, its doors engraved with the Imperial sigil. He placed a breaching charge against the control panel and stepped back. The explosion sent shockwaves through the hall. Smoke and sparks erupted as the doors yawned open. Reeves stepped through, rifle raised, eyes scanning. Inside, The command chamber was a stark contrast to the brutality of the Empire's architecture. Pristine, calculated, cold. Massive windows overlooked the burning capital, the fires of rebellion igniting below. The Supreme Commander's seat sat on an elevated dais, flanked by 2 honor guards, towering Zalari brutes, their weapons trained on the intruder. Droketh stood at the center of it all, his reptilian face twisted in something between fury and disbelief. "You," he hissed. "One human. One man. And yet, here you stand." Reeves tilted his head. "That a problem?" Droketh snarled, raising a clawed hand. The guards lunged. Reeves moved first. His rifle kicked against his shoulder as he fired. The first guard's helmet cracked open, green blood splattering against the floor. The second swung a massive energy blade. Reeves ducked, rolled, came up behind him. His knife found the gap between armor plates, driving deep. The alien gurgled and collapsed. Droketh did not move. His golden eyes locked onto Reeves. Then, he reached for the ornate sword at his waist. Reeves smirked. "You want to do this the old-fashioned way? Fine by me." The Supreme Commander moved fast, faster than any creature of his size should have been able to. His blade sliced through the air, a blur of lethal precision. Reeves barely dodged, feeling the heat of the energy blade singe his shoulder. He retaliated, striking with his knife, but Droketh deflected with practiced ease. They circled each other, predators testing weaknesses. Droketh feinted left, then struck right. Reeves twisted, narrowly avoiding decapitation. He countered with a brutal kick to the alien's knee. Droketh staggered, snarling. "I have crushed entire worlds," the Supreme Commander spat. "You are nothing." Reeves wiped blood from his mouth. "Yeah? Then why are you bleeding?" Droketh roared and lunged again. Reeves sidestepped, bringing his knife up in a brutal arc. The blade found flesh. The Supreme Commander stumbled, clutching his side where black blood oozed. Reeves did not hesitate. He drove the knife deeper, twisting. Droketh let out a ragged breath, his body sagging. His sword clattered to the ground. Reeves let him fall. The Supreme Commander of the Galactic Empire lay at his feet, gasping for air. Reeves leaned in close, voice cold. "This is for my people." He twisted the knife one last time, then pulled it free. Droketh's body went still. The room was silent, except for the distant sound of sirens. Reeves exhaled, taking a step back. The hardest part was done. Now came the escape. He turned to the massive communication console. If he was going to die here, he would make sure the galaxy knew what had happened. He began uploading every scrap of intelligence he had gathered, battle strategies, fleet movements, weaknesses in the Empire's defenses. Let the rebels and survivors use it to burn this monstrosity to the ground. The doors behind him burst open. More guards. He was out of time. Reeves grabbed a detonator from his belt and primed it. He had one last trick up his sleeve. He pressed the button. The explosives he had planted throughout the tower roared to life, a chain reaction of devastation. The structure groaned, its supports giving way. The floor beneath him trembled as the ceiling cracked. The Zalari soldiers barely had time to react before the entire chamber began to collapse. Reeves sprinted for the window. He had only one chance. He launched himself forward as the explosion tore through the room. Glass shattered, wind roared, and then he was free-falling, plummeting through the burning night. The wind howled around Reeves as he plummeted through the burning sky. Flames and debris spiraled past him, the fractured remains of the Supreme Commander's tower collapsing into the city below. His parachute pack was prepped, but he had to time it right, deploy too early, and he'd be an easy target for the Zalari anti-air defenses. Blaster fire streaked through the night, cutting through the smoke. The Empire wasn't just watching its command center fall. It was retaliating. Searchlights crisscrossed the ruins, sweeping for him. A squadron of interceptor drones shrieked into pursuit, their sleek forms slicing through the air like metallic predators. Reeves twisted midair, angling his body into a controlled dive. He reached for his sidearm, snapping off 3 precise shots. The first drone exploded in a burst of plasma. The second veered off course, spiraling into the wreckage. The third adjusted, locking onto him. Too close. No time to fire again. He ripped his knife from its sheath and flipped mid-fall, landing onto the drone's smooth surface. His weight threw it off balance, sending it into a wild spin. Reeves gritted his teeth, driving his blade into the machine's core. Sparks erupted, circuits shorting. At the last second, he pushed off, hurling himself away as the drone detonated behind him. He yanked his chute. The sudden jerk nearly dislocated his shoulder. The city below rushed up fast, too fast. He twisted his lines, angling for the only cover available, a half-destroyed spire near the outer sector. His boots hit the rooftop with a hard roll, the impact rattling through his bones. He exhaled sharply, cutting free from the parachute just as more searchlights swept past. They were hunting him. The Supreme Commander was dead, but the Empire's forces weren't about to let his killer walk away. Reeves pressed his back against the ruined steel, scanning the streets below. Troop carriers rumbled through the avenues, their floodlights illuminating the ruins. Sniper teams were already taking positions along the high-rises. They weren't just searching, they were locking down the district, closing the net. A metallic voice crackled over the city's loudspeakers. "Attention, insurgent. You are surrounded. Surrender, and your death will be swift. Resist, and you will be erased." Reeves let out a dry chuckle. Hell of a choice. He tapped his earpiece. "Command, you copy? The package is delivered. Extraction is a mess. Could use a little miracle." Silence. Then a burst of static. A familiar voice cut through. "Reeves, we've got eyes on you. Hold tight. ETA 3 minutes." 3 minutes was a long damn time in a kill zone. The first sniper round whizzed past his head. He dropped to a crouch, rolling behind cover as another shot punched through the concrete where he'd been standing. He scanned the skyline. 3 snipers staggered across different rooftops. No time to go silent. This needed to be fast. He ripped a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and lobbed it high. The explosion rocked the first sniper's perch, sending the alien tumbling to the street below. The second fired again, forcing him lower. Reeves grabbed the fallen drone's rifle, adjusted its scope, and fired one clean shot. The second sniper's head snapped back, his rifle clattering from his grip. The third took aim. Reeves was exposed. A sudden roar filled the air, deafening even over the chaos. A shadow streaked overhead, a low-flying dropship banking hard, its side cannons flashing to life. The sniper never had a chance. The impact sent his body sprawling across the rooftop. Reeves didn't waste time. He sprinted across the rooftop, leaping the gap to the next building as the dropship swung around, its ramp lowering mid-flight. Wind tore at his gear as he pushed himself forward, legs burning. The gap was too wide. He jumped anyway. For a split second, nothing but open air. Then, impact. His fingers caught the edge of the ramp. His body slammed into the hull, nearly knocking the wind from him. Hands grabbed his arms, hauling him up. "Took your damn time." Reeves grunted as he was pulled inside. His squad mates grinned. "Figure we'd let you have some fun first." He barely had a second to breathe before the ship rocked violently. Explosions tore through the night as Imperial fighters gave chase. The gunner swung into position, returning fire as the pilot pulled them into a brutal climb. "Hang on," the pilot yelled. Reeves grabbed onto the nearest rail as the ship banked hard, weaving between the ruined towers. Below, the capital burned. Above, the Empire's warships repositioned, scrambling to cut off their escape. A transmission broke through the static. "This is Fleet Command. We are en route. Initiate high-speed ascent. We'll punch a hole." The dropship surged upward. The atmosphere thickened, the pressure mounting. Behind them, the fighters were closing in. Then the sky cracked open. A barrage of railgun fire tore through the Imperial blockade as human warships emerged from the void, engines burning bright. The first destroyer unleashed a salvo that ripped apart the pursuing fighters. The second cleared a path through the orbital defenses. Reeves exhaled. The cavalry had arrived. The dropship shot past the wreckage, breaking free from the planet's gravity well. Alarms still blared, but the worst was over. The Empire's capital was in flames. The Supreme Commander was dead, and the Resistance had just been handed a reason to believe. Reeves sank into his seat, letting the adrenaline drain from his system. His job wasn't over yet. There were more battles to fight. But for tonight, they had one. His fingers traced the hilt of his knife, still stained with Drokatha's blood. A reminder, the Empire was not untouchable, and humanity was far from finished. The air inside the Imperial Citadel reeked of ozone, blood, and burning metal. Alarms howled. Automated defenses screamed warnings in a dozen alien dialects, and the floor was slick with the corpses of guards who had stood in the path of the SAS Operative. Kane moved through the carnage, his breath slow and steady despite the adrenaline hammering through his system. The exosuit, now scarred from the battle, still functioned flawlessly. His HUD flickered with data, enemy movements, structural weaknesses, and the dwindling time before the Citadel's core defenses would lock down. He had minutes, maybe less. A squad of Praetorians burst into the corridor ahead, their gleaming armor reflecting the emergency lights. Their commander snarled something in Imperial Standard, a command Kane neither knew nor cared to understand. He moved before they did, his reflexes honed by a lifetime of war. 2 shots from his silent sidearm found the first soldier's exposed throat. The others raised their weapons, but Kane was already moving, rolling low beneath the first volley of plasma fire. He came up inside their ranks, knife in one hand, submachine gun in the other. The corridor filled with the sound of wet gurgles and the crack of suppressed, round striking flesh. They never stood a chance. The path ahead was clear for now. The control room was just beyond the next chamber, a vast hall where the Empire's high command coordinated planetary invasions. If he took it, the entire Imperial war effort would be crippled. Kane reloaded as he ran, his mind calculating angles, threats, and contingencies. The heavy blast doors sealed shut the moment he entered the hall. Towers of hollow displays flickered as officers scrambled for cover. The Grand Strategist stood at the far end, a towering figure draped in ceremonial gold, his reptilian features contorted in fury. "You are a disease," the alien spat, drawing an ornate plasma sword. "A single human cannot undo the might of the Galactic Empire." Kane smiled grimly. "Watch me." He lunged, using the room's scattered cover to close the distance. The strategist's elite bodyguards opened fire, but Kane moved like a wraith, his silenced rifle spitting death. Screens shattered, consoles exploded, and bodies dropped. Smoke and sparks turned the chamber into a nightmarish haze of chaos. The Grand Strategist charged, swinging the plasma blade in a deadly arc. Kane barely avoided the strike, feeling the heat sear past his armor. He countered with a brutal elbow to the alien's jaw, followed by a combat knife buried deep into its side. The strategist howled, clawing at Kane's helmet, but the SAS operative twisted the blade and drove it deeper. With a final, gurgling breath, the alien collapsed. Kane ripped the knife free, wiping the blood against his armor. The war room was his. He accessed the controls, bypassing security with a stolen command chip. The Citadel's defense network crumbled in seconds. Outside, Imperial forces found their own weapons turning against them, automated turrets ripping through their ranks. The Empire's fleet, now blind, was already suffering heavy losses from the human strike force waiting beyond the atmosphere. It was over. Kane activated his comm, mission complete. The voice on the other end was calm, almost amused. Acknowledged. Extraction inbound. You left quite the mess. Kane looked at the bodies, the destruction, the smoking ruins of what had once been the heart of the Empire's war machine. Yeah, he said, I tend to do that. Outside, the once invincible armada burned, and across the galaxy, the legend of the human who brought destruction to the Galactic Empire was just beginning.